Chapter 40, Release. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 40. Release. Mr. Crow descended from the air, his feathers were stained with blood. He stretched his wings, hovered above Ji Hao, continuously cawing, while watching the still twitching bodies of the 3 Fire Crow clan warriors. The eyes of Mr. Crow had turned from red into garnet, as if his pupils were soaked in blood. Ji Hao used his left hand to hold the throat of the 3-eyed young man, while using the dagger in his right hand to make random cuts on the young man's chest and arms. Blood-soaked slashes continuously appeared on the 3-eyes his body. He was suffering from the pain, cursing and desperately struggling the whole time. The vertical eye, between his eyebrows, frequently opened and closed, to the point of making a whirring noise. But no matter how much he struggled, he was unable to escape Ji Hao's control. 3 eyes. Move again and I will dig this eyeball out too, growled Ji Hao and hit the 3rd eye hard with the hilt of the dagger. 3 eyes screamed out in pain, tears gushed out from all his 3 eye sockets. After that he stayed still, not daring to make even a single movement. You are inviting disaster for your clan, kid, roared Toba, while grabbing Ji Ying's neck in his hand. Di Luo is our captain and the blood brother of Blood Tooth's leader. The Blood Tooth is. Before Toba could finish his speech, Ji Hao moved his dagger with great speed and before one could blink, he chopped 3 fingers off from the right hand of Di Luo. The 3-eyed man, Di Luo, instantly howled furiously. Di Luo, huh? Not a bad name. Sounds prestigious. The spell symbols of the 9 secret words rapidly flashed through Ji Hao's eyes. An invisible power surged around Ji Hao's body, his long hair dancing madly in the air, as if they were snakes. Ji Hao's appearance was transmitting a strange and cold vibe, which made the others shudder unconsciously. Whatever your blood tooth may be, it is unrelated to me. Whoever this kid is, whose brother or son he is, what does that have to do with me? Ji Hao swung his arm and left a deep slash mark on Di Luo's beautiful, sculpture-like face. After that he said with a cold voice. Release my uncles or my next will leave him castrated. #starts, screamed Di Luo again, and after hearing what Ji Hao said, he also started to struggle. Mr. Crow ruthlessly flapped his right wing, a fiercely burning feather appeared in front of Di Luo's body, burning his gorgeous cloak into ashes. Soon after all of his clothes burned into a wisp of smoke, bearing his white, tender, young girl-like body. Caw. Mr. Crow cawed sharply. Ji Hao has known Mr. Crown for years, he perfectly understood his language. He laughed out, while maintaining the cold look on his face. Mr. Crow, are you saying that I should cut it in half at first? Excellent idea. Well, what do you think? Should I cut it sideways? Or vertically? Ji Hao made an evil face, held the dagger near his crotch and said. Toba, Toa, the vertical eye between Di Luo's eyebrows suddenly closed. Only one eye on his face was left open and the eyeball was anxiously rotating around in his eye socket. He was trembling intensely and sweat poured down on his body as if they were streams of the lake. Release them. Di Luo. Listen to us. He and we both must release the hostages at the same moment. Or, we will kill more of his side. Kill 10. Either you release Di Luo now or we will kill 10 more. Even if you castrate him, we can always find some medicine that can make his body part grow back. Kill 10 more. Kill 10 more. Release Di Luo or you are going to watch your people getting killed by us, one by one. Toba yelled. The Blood Tooth's warriors, who were standing behind Ji Hao, let growls escape from their mouth. They raised their weapons simultaneously and were ready to behead the warriors in their captivity. Growl. A great roar came from far away, like a tiger roar which shook the entire jungle and shocked all the animals living in it. On a mountain top, miles away, thousands of towering trees suddenly exploded into bits of wood. After that half of the mountain collapsed. Another mountain standing at the side was blown into the air by an enormous power and burst into pieces. Toba and Toa were shocked, all 8 of their eyes had shrunk to the size of a tiny dot. Yellow and silver spell symbols began to flash rapidly on their bronze skins. A similar occurrence was taking place on their faces. The collapse of the mountain caused a cloud of dust to be formed, which rapidly was spreading around. Soon, the sound wave reached the valley and flew across it like a tornado. The slaves who weren't standing firmly, were rolled up high into the air by the fierce wind, caused by the roar. They flew away like leaves blown in the wind. The sound of arrows piercing through human bodies could be heard. Countless arrows appeared in the air, they were coming so fast, couldn't even be seen clearly. The blood-tooth warriors then started to howl and fell on the ground, one after another. The powerful arrows went through their bodies, through their throats, the area between their eyebrows, or eye sockets, and stuck on the ground. Blood splashed everywhere. An ear-piercing rustling sound came from out of the valley. A sturdy silhouette rose high into the air from the mountaintop, which just collapsed by half, landed heavily on the Coldbrook Valley and left a huge arch of fiery light behind him. The ground shook intensely by the heavy landing. It was Ji Xia. He landed in front of Ji Hao with only a piece of fur wrapped around his waist. With a thundering noise, the ground near Ji Xia's feet fractured and tens of fist-sized gold and jade pieces popped out from the cracks. Toba and Toa's pupils shrunk again. They threw a glance, filled with greed, at those jade and gold pieces and nervously looked towards Ji Xia. "Let's exchange hostages," Ji Xia said gently. "Let Ji Ying and Ji Lang go, and we can give this 3-eyed kid back to you." Consecutive ear-shattering sounds could be heard. It was Ji Bao leading the other tens of Fire Crow clan warriors. They leaped high in the air from a mountaintop miles away and bounced into the Coldbrook Valley like fleas. On a mountainside farther away, Qin Ying was leading a batch of Qin Yi clan warriors hiding among branches. Hundreds of long arrows were aimed at the vital parts of Toba and Toa's bodies. "Will you let us leave safely?" Toba tightly grabbed Ji Ying's throat and said coldly. Ji Xia patted his own chest and said in a gentle voice, "I swear on my ancestor's soul, only if you don't hurt Ji Ying and Ji Lang, I will let you take this 3-eyed kid and leave safely. But, if I ever see you again, I will chop your heads off and offer them to my ancestors' souls as obligations. I believe your promise, you barbarian." Toba and Toa loosened their grips simultaneously and pushed Ji Ying and Ji Lang hard toward Ji Xia. After that, while staring at Ji Xia, they said, "We will come back. This kid dug one of Di Luo's eyeballs out. We, the Blood Tooth, will take revenge for it." Ji Hao loosened his hand and gave Di Luo a kick, which sent him flying towards Toba and Toa. With a thud sound, Di Luo crashed onto the Toba's body. "We will be expecting your revenge." This Di Luo guy here said that you have been waiting outside the Coldbrook Valley for over a month. "Are you waiting for us?" asked Ji Hao. Toba held Di Luo in his arms and said with a bitter voice, "Yes, a month ago we came here to attack you. We failed because we underestimated your power. Next time, we will bring more warriors with us." Di Luo fainted, his face had a blue tint. Toba and Toa inhaled deep and covered Di Luo. Surrounded by the remaining tens of blood-tooth warriors who luckily survived the arrows, they ran into the jungle at their highest speed. Only after the blood-tooth went into the jungle, did Ji Hao quickly pull out a feather from Mr. Crow's tail, held it in his hand and flicked his fingers. The feather transformed into a small black peak-crow crow under Ji Hao's magical power. The small crow flew into the sky, following Toba and Toa into the dense jungle. "Whoa! This magic trick is not bad," praised Ji Xia. "It seems that even Granddaddy Ji Kuei doesn't know how to do this." Ji Hao was focusing on the peak-crow, smiled and didn't say a word. Chapter 41, Conspire. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 41. Conspire, ha. Ha. ha ha ha. In the jungle, Di Luo, who was being carried by Toa, was laughing insanely, while blood was flowing from his mouth, spasmodically. Toba. Toa. I can't believe that a bunch of barbarians hurt me so badly. We, the Blood Tooth, have caught and sold over 1 million slaves in this South Wasteland's jungle. No one was ever able to hurt me, not even a little bit. But this time I've been wounded severely. Captain, we'll definitely return and we will bring Captain D. Shah and his team with us. Toba snapped the thick vines in their path, while comforting Di Luo with a solemn voice. Di Luo continued to laugh insanely for a while, after which he gnashed his teeth and started to curse Ji Hao viciously. Stop, commanded Di Luo suddenly. Toba, Toa and the tens of warriors, who were walking behind them, stopped immediately. Toa put Di Luo carefully down. Di Luo frowned and focused his gaze on a 5-finger-wide, exquisite, cyan bracelet around his left wrist. A faint, cyan light flashed through the bracelet and a beautiful, silk cloak appeared in Di Luo's hands. Tens of miles away, Ji Hao's spying crow was hiding behind branches and watching them. When the spying crow saw the bracelet, its pupils instantly shrunk. In the cold stream valley, Ji Hao was controlling the spying crow with his magic power. When he received the vision from the spying crow, he grinded his teeth and his heart started to beat faster. Spatial bracelet. The legendary spatial bracelet. In my previous life, the spatial bracelet was a precious treasure, existing only in legends. Even in this life, which is filled with magic, it seems rare, because no one, not even the most knowledgeable elder Magusriist in the Fire Crow clan, has mentioned it, not even once. Does this Di Luo guy really possess the spatial bracelet from the legends? Exclaimed Ji Hao in his head. His heart was pounding in his chest, the veins on his forehead formed dark, visible lines and his blood boiled from the excitement. He had a strong desire to mount Mr. Crow and go immediately after Di Luo. He wanted to kill him and snatch his spatial bracelet. But he immediately abandoned that thought. The cold stream valley was a big mess at the moment. Qing Fu was busy healing the injured warriors, sweat dripping from her face. Ji Xia was leading Ji Bao, Qing Ying and the other warriors, in a chase after the savage warriors, who were fleeing in every direction. It looked similar to chasing a group of chickens. Ji Xia had sworn on the souls of his ancestors that he would let Di Luo and his underlings leave unharmed, so there was no way he would break his promise. But even if Ji Hao would chase after Di Luo, there was simply no way for him to snatch that spatial bracelet. No matter how attractive the bracelet seemed, he lacked enough strength to deal with Di Luo and his underlings. Even if Mr. Crow helped him, it still wouldn't be enough. The spying crow slightly shook its head, its pupils were glowing faintly. Di Luo was cursing unceasingly in a low voice. He pulled a 2-feet-long, black, metal centipede out from his bracelet, dropped it on the ground and mumbled an incantation. One by one, a series of spell symbols started to glow on the centipede. Under influence of the spell, the centipede's body started to expand rapidly. Within the span of a few breaths, an over 300 feet long, gigantic, metal centipede appeared in front of Di Luo and his people. Di Luo waved his hand silently and hopped on the centipede's back, followed by Toba, Toa and the other tens of warriors. Under Di Luo's control, the centipede strode swiftly through the jungle, while carrying Di Luo and his underlings, quickly leaving the cold stream valley. About 7 minutes later, the metal centipede had already covered 20 miles. It crawled, through a cliff, into a river valley, where it quietly lied on the riverside beach. The spying crow flew across the river valley and landed gracefully on the branch of a small tree, in front of the river. Its blood-red eyes were fixed on the centipede. Back in the cold stream valley, Ji Hao was sitting in front of a cave, wiping the sweat on his forehead inside, feeling relieved. Fortunately, Di Luo and his people didn't go too far. With his current power, the maximum range he could control the spying crow was 20 miles. If Di Luo would have moved a bit farther, then Ji Hao wouldn't have the ability to observe their activities, through the spying. Crow. After receiving the new view through the spying. Crow, his body quivered unconsciously. Damn bastards! Ji Mu. Ji Shao. You ganged up with outsiders and tried to kill your own clansmen. In the river valley, tens of sturdy Fire Crow clan warriors were quietly standing on the beach, looking coldly at Di Luo and his people, who were all injured and disheveled looking. Standing in front of the Fire Crow clan warriors was Ji Shao, the father of Ji Hu, the kid killed by Ji Hao 2 months ago. He was quite an influential senior magus among the Holy Land warriors of the Fire Crow clan. Standing beside Ji Shao was Ji Shu's brother, Ji Mu, who had thrown the first stone at Ji Xia for the position of the leader, before the ancestors' worship ceremony. He too was a powerful senior magus. Ji Shao stared at Di Luo and his people, gnashing his teeth, and said, Ji Mu, are these the old friends you talked about? Didn't you say that they'll revenge my son? Is this a joke? Look at them. They're like a group of drowned rats. Ji Shao stamped his foot hard and yelled. I gave them huge amounts of gold and jade, and they came back like this. Ji Mu's pupils were shining with a deviant light. He patted Ji Shao on the shoulder and opened his arms, walking toward Di Luo. Di Luo, my brother, my old friend, it seems the attack didn't went well. I thought you had given your word that you were going to invade the Cold Stream Valley. Di Luo didn't reciprocate the hug Ji Mu was giving. Instead, he stepped back with a face filled with disgust, and yelled harshly. This is all your fault. You gave us the wrong information. Toba and Toa were more than able to beat the 3 persons, who recently became senior magus. The only obstacles would be Ji Xia and Qing Fu, who according to you were badly injured and had lost their powers. Not only is that not true, you never even mentioned that the little bastard already made an agreement with a gigantic Fire Crow. Di Luo puffed and continued. Di Luo glared at Ji Mu with his 2 remaining eyes and said with his teeth gnashing. I could have invaded the Cold Stream Valley, killed your enemies, and make a fortune for myself at the same time. But because of your wrong information, we underestimated their power and I lost 3 fingers and an eye. You have to compensate me accordingly. Ji Mu, I want 10 times of the advance payment, or I'll let you know how horrible our blood tooth can be. Di Luo pointed at Ji Mu and yelled. Ji Mu's eyes stared at him, his rugged face seemed to have frozen. You surely made a mistake, didn't you? Only the Magi who made great contributions to the clan are qualified to make an agreement with the Fire Crows of our clan. Even Ji Xia didn't acquire the required qualification. How could the kid, murmured Ji Mu, with a sullen face. After murmuring for a while, he turned around, pointed his finger at Ji Shao, and said. Shao, my brother, if you want to revenge your poor son, I'm afraid that you have to do the thing you're not willing to do. This time, however, you will have to do it. Mu, I'll never attack our brother Ji Xia, Ji Shao said, with a trembling voice. His face was twitching intensely, his body was shivering uncontrollably, sweat pouring down from his forehead. I just want to revenge Hu, my dear son, but I'll never do anything to brother Xiao. But you already did. Ji Mu looked at Ji Shao in the eye and slowly said, Shao, you standing right here means that you've already done something to Ji Xiao. Ji Mu stared at the distorted face of Ji Shao and continued with a soothing voice. Well, you don't need to deal with Ji Xia, you only need to handle the others. As for Ji Xia, there is someone else willing to finish him. Who? Ji Shao blurted out. Me, of course. A hoarse voice came from the rapidly flowing river. A water tank thick-horned, black serpent slowly raised from the river. Chapter 42, Counterplan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 42. Counterplan the spying. Crow silently transformed into a wisp of black smoke and dissipated in the air along with the whirling wind. Back in the cold stream valley, Ji Hao leaped from the ground, darted up to Qing Fu, put his mouth near her ear, preventing others to overhear them, and whispered what he saw through the spying. Crow's eyes in the river valley. Qing Fu was recovering the energy of the badly injured Fire Crow clan's warriors with her cyan-colored, thorns of life and death, needle. When she heard what had transpired in the river valley, she stopped healing and slowly stood up, while massaging her waist. Her eyes shimmered with a profound cold light. "How, go get your Abba, we have some work to do," said Qing Fu. The sun slowly moved across the sky and went under, behind the hills in the west. The sky was adorned by countless little stars. Multicolored starlight formed a smoke-like glow, visible to human eyes, and descended from the sky. Countless creatures, living in the jungle, raised their heads and absorbed the power contained in the starlight. Now and then, loud and imposing roars reverberated from the depths of the valley. Ji Hao was sitting on the branch of a tall, majestic tree. Next to him was a girl, who sat on the back of a red leopard. This was none other than his friend Heng Luo, a nymph, also known as the goddess of the forest. She was carefully spreading poisonous liquid onto hundreds of long arrows. A jade jar, the size of a human head, was placed in her lap. The jar contained a light cyan, crystal clear, poisonous liquid, which emitted a dim herbal smell. Under the starlight, some tiny spell symbols emerged from the surface of the liquid, twisting like little snakes. It caused a beautiful glow to flash across the liquid, disappearing quickly. "How, I thought your Amma only knew how to save people. I never knew that she could make such powerful poison." While speaking, Heng Luo dipped a leaf into the liquid and dripped a drop down. The drop of poison fell on the jade-like shoulder of Stone, who was standing under the tree. The poison burned a hole through his shoulders, while emitting a faint, cyan smoke, instantly. "Booze," growled Stone, annoyed. He pressed his stone-made hand onto a huge rock, which crumbled into dust. Next up, he pressed it back on his damaged shoulder. The hole, created by the poison drop, healed instantly, without leaving so much as a scratch. Treeman lifted his enormous head, while a rustling sound could be heard coming from his trunk. It seemed as if he was trying to say something, but no one was able to understand him. Finally one of his branches bended, without breaking, and dipped into the jar. The branch contained a drop of the poison and moved towards a huge hole in the tree, which basically functioned as Treeman's mouth. Strands of black smoke, along with a sizzling sound, rose from within Treeman's mouth. He began to tremble in pain and the few leaves hanging on his branches drooped. He glanced at the jar, his eyes filled with reverence, and muttered, "Qing Fu, Magusriasts. Woman. Scary." Suddenly the branches and leaves above Ji Hao began to shake. A nearly 30-foot tall, muscular ape jumped down heavily. His entire body was covered with black fur and in his hand he held a huge wooden stick. The ape pointed at Ji Hao, grinned and mumbled, "How? You kid. Booze. Stronger. I want double of Stone's booze. How? I won't go crazy drunk this time. You got to give me more." Mr. Crow quietly landed on Ji Hao's shoulder and cawed gently. Ji Hao waved his hands and said in a resolute tone, "Of course, as long as you guys help me get rid of my enemies, I'll supply the best booze and grilled meat, as much as you want." "Mr. Crow, thanks." He then patted Mr. Crow and said in a low voice. Mr. Crow had spent the whole day traveling across the forest, bringing the strong non-human friends of Ji Hao to him. Heng Luo, Stone, and Treeman were all strong creatures, even stronger than ordinary senior magi like Ji Ying and Ji Lang. If they didn't have that much strength, it would have been impossible for them to beat Jiang Yao so hard a couple months ago. As for that black ape, he was the most powerful among Ji Hao's friends. Even if Heng Luo, Treeman, and Stone combined their powers, they couldn't rival the black ape. It was a pitch-black night. Near the entrance of the cold stream valley, 3 blood-stained heads of beasts were placed aligned, on a jade altar. In each of the heads a cyan, wooden knife had been stuck. Qing Fu was standing in front of the altar, with all of her 10 fingers bleeding. She was drawing a series of odd spell symbols, using her own blood and whispering a mysterious spell. Her beautiful face was shrouded by a weird, faint, white fog. The fog was rising and falling around her body, blurring her slim silhouette. It made her look like a ghost, which was existing in both this world and another, mysterious yet spooky, world. Small, gray whirlwinds came from every direction, swirling towards the valley. Following Qing Fu's whisper, about 7 minutes later, thousands of gray whirlwinds, in different sizes, appeared from the forest. They circled around the altar, causing the air to freeze. Soon, a thin layer of ice appeared on the surface of the cold stream, freezing even the plants nearby. Ji Hao was staring at Qing Fu, while rubbing the red leopard's fluffy tail, and said, "Hey evil girl, didn't you just say that you didn't know my Amma can make such powerful poison? Even I didn't know my Amma is so good at these mystical spirit magic. Bang! Along with a bang, an immense green fire spurted out from the ears, eyes, noses and mouths, of all the 3 beast heads on the altar, simultaneously. The green flame growed bigger and bigger, slowly forming a ferocious face. Soft yet creepy sounds came from the jungle, after which a heavy fog surged out from the jungle and flowed through the plants like water. Some weird figures emerged from the fog, they opened their mouths widely towards the sky and swallowed the starlight power. BL.net Every hair on Ji Hao's body stood erect. He gazed dumbfounded at those, unbelievably mysterious, beings and couldn't say even a word. The Fire Crow clan's Magusriists normally didn't know much about how to communicate with those mysterious beings of the jungle. They, instead mastered all kinds of different witchcrafts, which could directly cause great harm to enemies. Though Ji Hao had been learning Magusriists' witchcraft since he was a little kid, he had never seen anything like this. The phantoms of the jungle and the gods and the ghosts of the mountains, rivers, caves, and marshes, please accept my gift, please respond to my request. Qing Fu whispered the spell and started dancing in a strange rhythm around the altar. Ji Hao felt like there were thousands of invisible figures dancing along with his mother. Small gusts of wind blew out from under every leaf and grass. Ji Xia arrived and walked towards the altar with a somber face. Behind him, were thousands of savage warriors, who were captured by Ji Xia and his subordinates, during the day. Every one of them had taken Qing Fu's drug, losing consciousness, and followed Ji Xia like walking corpses. We offer these lives to you, the gods and the ghosts in this jungle, Qing Fu said. She then pulled out a cyan, wooden knife and waved it in the air. Ji Xia pulled out an axe and swung it toward those savage warriors. The next moment, tens of human heads were sent flying high into the air, blood sprayed up and covered the night sky. All of the gray whirlwinds, which were circling around the altar, rushed up and drained the blood. Those savages' bodies shrunk rapidly, turning into ashes within the span of few breaths and were blown away by the wind. Within few breaths, thousands of savage warriors were all drained and turned to ash, not leaving even a trace of blood. Suddenly, Ji Hao let out a sharp whistle and waved his hands towards Qing Fu and Ji Xia. Abba! Amma! I saw them. A red light flashed through Ji Hao's pupils. Tens of miles away, 7 spying crows had the same red lights flashing through their pupils. Chapter 43, Ambush. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Note. Hi everyone, Blood Tooth has been changed to Blood Fawn. We will implement the change also in the previous chapters during our edit. Let us know what you think of this change. Thank you and enjoy. Chapter 43. Ambush. Grumble. Stone murmured something to himself, then lied down on the ground, huddled up, closed his eyes, and turned into what seemed like a pile of ordinary stones. Treeman stood on Stone's body, tens of tendril-like roots plunged deeply into the ground. Similar to Stone, he too closed his eyes and turned himself into an ordinary tree. He leaned against another tree, that looked ancient and majestic. Hong Luo gently patted the red leopard she was riding on, the leopard then darted out like a ghost with no mass. Lively and agilely the leopard trod on the tips of the branches and leaped miles with a few jumps. In the blink of an eye, Hong Luo and her leopard disappeared in the jungle, like a drop blending with the sea, without leaving even a single trace. The black ape patted his own chest, looked around for a while and hid, while carrying his huge wooden stick on his shoulder, into a big tree hole. Similar to the others, the ape too was a powerful creature, nourished by the jungle. He took a deep breath and merged his internal energy with the natural energy of the jungle. As such, even powerful Magusriists wouldn't be able to detect his presence. Ji Hao leaped through the branches, while holding a long spear. After a while, he arrived at Jia Xia's location. He quietly stood beside Jia Xia and stared into the forest. Qing Fu and the altar were covered by a fog, which quickly turned translucent and gradually disappeared along with Qing Fu and the altar in it. By now, the gray whirlwinds, the fog and all those weird figures, had all merged with the dim light of the night. The jungle became quiet, spreading a tranquil yet extremely weird atmosphere. A 300 feet long, metal centipede crawled silently out of the dense jungle. Di Luo was standing on the centipede's head, gnashing his teeth and was cursing something. He suddenly raised his head, staring at Ji Hao and Ji Xia, stunned. Toba and Toa, who were standing behind him, were also struck speechless by the presence of Ji Xia and Ji Hao. Damn! Don't you people sleep? Di Luo pointed at Ji Hao and growled irritated. Behind them, tens of Blood Fawn warriors were sneaking silently out of the jungle. Obviously, they were on their way to ambush Jia Xia's troops during the night. Without a doubt, they were all of dumbfounded too when they saw Ji Xia and Ji Hao. This was obviously not how it was planned. According to Di Luo's plan, these well-trained Blood Fawn warriors would ambush the Fire Crow guards at the entrance of the valley. Afterwards they would break into the valley, create chaos and draw Ji Xia out of the valley and into the jungle, where they would encircle him and launch a sneak attack. But, why weren't Ji Xia and Ji Hao not sleeping so late into in the night, and instead standing straight up here? Abba and me. We have been expecting you. Ji Hao sneered at Di Luo, who was standing on the metal centipede's head with a shocked face, then let out a shout towards the jungle behind the metal centipede. Oi, you, hiding in the darkness, come out. The jungle was deadly silent. Ji Mu and Ji Xiao were hidden behind trees. They glanced at each other, they weren't sure whether Ji Hao truly discovered their presence or if he simply was bluffing. On a tree beside them, a tank-like thick serpent coiled its body, lowered its head slowly and stared Ji Shu and Ji Mu in the eyes. Blackwater Jiao was standing on the head of the horned snake, while his left hand was tightly wrapped around Jian Shue's tender neck. Jiang Shui kneeled on the huge serpent's head, eyes filled with tears, piteously looking towards Ji Mu and Ji Xiao. Oi, what's wrong with you two? Just do it. We all want Ji Xia to die, don't we? Jiao looked at Ji Xiao and laughed mockingly, and continued. Once Ji Xia dies, no one in the clan could ever be a threat to you. And by killing Ji Xia, we can also destroy a terrifying enemy of our Blackwater Serpent clan, isn't that a good thing? Hundreds of Blackwater Serpent clan warriors silently walked out, they were all wearing snakeskin armors, holding similar-looking daggers, which were dipped in poisonous liquid, and carrying long swords, which were poisoned too. Blackwater Jiao lifted one of his fingers, stroked the delicate face of Jiang Shui, and said. Someone gave me the whereabouts of Ji Xia in exchange for this little girl, which is how I found this place. I brought my best warriors along with me. To kill Ji Xia. Once he is killed, you can have this girl back. Ji Mu narrowed his eyes, looked at Jiang Shui and showed a trace of excitement. He said, "Of course we'll bring her back, she is the daughter of Jiang Shu, one of the elder Magusriists of the Baifeng clan." He then turned to Ji Xiao and said, "Xiao, my brother, since we failed to get Ji Xia into the jungle and let Jiao launch an ambush on him, let's launch a frontal attack." The thick-horned serpent uncoiled itself from the tree and slithered out of the jungle, as fast as black lightning. Blackwater Jiao laughed out loud on the serpent's head, pointed his finger at Ji Xia and said coldly, "Ji Xia, it has been a long time. Do you remember Blackwater Mang? The man you killed? That was my elder brother. I came here to avenge him." Blackwater Mang. Ji Xia sniffed scornfully, shook his head, then said, "I slaughtered too many of your vile snakes, it's impossible to remember each of them. Do your Blackwater Serpent clan have to be so shameless and gang up with these monsters? Do you have any idea how many of our clansmen they've captured and sold? Not only from our Fire Crow clan, but from your clan too, and your subsidiary clans. They've taken our brothers, sisters and friends from us." Ji Xia shouted to Blackwater Jiao, while pointing his finger at Di Luo. Jiao laughed in rage, then responded, "Of course I know. Indeed, they're the enemy of the entire South Wasteland. But, as long as I get to kill you, what's the big deal about working with monsters? Remember, I am the blood brother of Blackwater Mang. By the way, Ji Xia, your father was killed by our ambush." The horned snake opened its large mouth and spewed a strand of black fog out. Everything in the path of the black fog froze instantly. Thick layers of ice covered the ground and huge rocks shattered due to being frozen. Ji Hao could feel a bone-piercing coldness. Even though he was quite far from the fog, a thin layer of ice still rapidly appeared on his skin. At the same time the snake spewed the fog, Jiao pulled a long sword out and pointed the sword tip at Ji Xia. "What are you waiting for? Let's attack together," finished Ji Xia, growled Jiao. "I'll chop his head off and use it as a mug, my ancestors would love that as an offering." Inside the jungle, 3 senior magi from the Blackwater Serpent clan grinned hideously. The horned serpents, coiling around their waists, bolted out simultaneously and expanded their bodies to hundreds of feet of length. The 3 senior magi hopped on the serpent heads and planned to rush out of the jungle. At this moment, however, Treeman, who was standing 300 feet away from those senior magi and pretending to be an ordinary tree, suddenly opened its flame-like eyes, emitting a muffled roar. Countless fist-thick vines darted towards those senior magi and their serpents, whipped and crashed against their bodies. The 3 senior magi were sent flying right away, all of them screamed out in pain. Treeman didn't stop attacking. Countless vines lashed out on their bodies like a storm and splintered their snakeskin armors. Ji Mu reacted very fast. He flew up to Treeman as soon as Treeman moved, pulled out a heavy axe and chopped towards Treeman. However, the dirt under Treeman's feet suddenly bursted out, a huge white arm thrust out from the ground and heavily pounded on Ji Mu's chest. Ji Mu was sent flying backward swirling, smashed 2 trees before finally falling into the jungle. Ji Xiao growled, half in shock and half in fear. He was thrown into confusion and didn't know what to do. Before Ji Xiao could make up his mind, hundreds of light spots emerged from the night sky, along with rustling sounds. Those were hundreds of poisoned arrows, which were flying towards the jungle. The faint herbal scent, emitted from the arrowheads, was so intoxicating. Chapter 44, Hurt. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 44. Hurt. Those arrows were shot by Heng Luo from hundreds of miles away. Together with those flying arrows, the jungle started to move. All the plants seemed to have awakened a conscience. They were shaking their branches in order to confuse those warriors hidden in the jungle. The shadows of the branches had completely merged with the shadows of the arrows, and even the powerful senior magi couldn't tell the direction from where the arrows would come. Damn! Followed by a light whiz, a black water serpent clan warrior shouted out. An arrow flashed across his face, leaving a small cut on it. The next moment, however, this hair-thick small cut suddenly enlarged, and expanded into a palm-wide cut. Black, pus-like blood gushed out from the slash, the skin and flesh on his face were rapidly decaying. This warrior instantly started wailing and screaming. He tried to scratch his own face, but his hands corroded soon as well. He watched as his own fingers turned into drops of black blood and dripped down onto the ground. Even his bones were completely corroded. A great wave of cries and screams burst out from the crowd of Black Water Serpent clan warriors, who were hiding in the dark jungle and waiting for orders to launch the attack. These warriors fell on the ground one after another, and their bodies melted quickly into puddles of black blood. 3 huge, horned serpents were darting around agitatedly, continuously hissing, with their black fork-shaped tongue hung out. Some of these warriors were hit by the arrows in their vital parts, whereas most only got their faces or fingers scratched. However, the poison, made by Qing Fu, was too powerful. In the span of few breaths, the poison took the warriors' lives through the scratches. Over 100 snakeskin armors were left lying on the ground, soaked in the black pus-like blood, corroded by the poison in the blood, and made sizzling noises. Shameless bastards! How dare you stab us in the bee? Yelled a senior magus, who was sent flying in the air by Treeman's branch. However, once the poor man opened his mouth, a thick vine shoved into his mouth and broke all his teeth, nearly reaching his stomach through his throat. Another senior magus, who also was beaten hard by Treeman earlier, shouted. The horned serpents stopped fleeing immediately, turned around and pounced on Treeman, with their jaws wide opened. From quite some distance, the 3 horned serpents shot a large amount of venom towards Treeman. The 2 flame-like green eyes of Treeman were gleaming. He opened his tree-hole-like mouth and blew a thick, cold fog towards the serpents. At the same time, the plants around him started to squirm madly, leaves and small branches were shot out towards those serpents. Treeman ignored the venom of those serpents. He was an ancient tree, to begin with, which meant that none of the vipers or venomous miasmas in this jungle could ever hurt him. 2 of the horned serpents were beaten back by the bullet-like leaves and branches. The 3rd serpent, however, managed to approach Treeman and bit hard on one of his roots. A piece of tree bark was bitten into pieces, along with cracking noises. The serpent slacked its jaws, coughed a mouthful wood splinters out, embarrassedly. There was no blood or flesh inside Treeman's body, except wood. The serpent tried to inject its venom into Treeman's body, but failed. Following that, an 100 feet tall silhouette rose from under Treeman's roots. It was none other than Stone, who had just punched Ji Mu's chest. Now he raised his foot high and stamped hard on the bodies of the 3 serpents. Bang! The 3 serpents were stamped deeply into the ground. The surrounding jungle shook intensely for miles, hundreds of big trees jumped up. These trees couldn't bear such strong vibrations, their roots were broken and their trunks splintered. When Stone pulled his foot up again, a deep crater was left on the ground. The 3 serpents raised their heads, shooting venom and cold poisonous gas angrily towards Stone. But none of their attacks worked. Stone lifted his huge foot again and stamped the 3 horned serpents deeper into the ground. Ho! Stone let a roar out displeased, great earthy power gushed out of his mouth. The 3 horned serpents were as powerful as ordinary senior magi, with strong life force and nearly indestructible bodies. Although they had been stamped by Stone twice now, they were still holding their heads high and casting attacks to Stone unceasingly from the deep crater. Stone was furious. He decided to choose the most simple, direct, and violent attacking method. He stooped down, used a barrage of punches on the ground, enlarged the crater big enough to contain his own body, then jumped into it, madly waving his 10 feet thick, huge stone made fists and smashing those 3 horned serpents. The three poor serpents were desperately spurting venom and cold poison gas towards Stone. Normally, a slight wisp of their poisonous gas could kill a strong man easily, but on Stone, it was completely ineffective. The heavy fists of Stone smashed on their bodies continuously, broke their horns and bones, shattered their scales, and crushed all of their internal organs. The thundering punches didn't stop. The three-horned serpents lost the power to resist, quickly sank hundreds of feet deep into the ground under Stone's punches, like wooden piles driven by a piledriver. "What kind of monster is this?" shouted those three senior magi. They were still suffering from Treeman's lashes, and hadn't got a chance to fight back yet, withstanding the attacks only with their extremely strong senior magi bodies. At the same time, they watched their serpents being killed brutally by Stone. Before their voices faded, a sharp roar caught their ears. A huge tree suddenly burst up. A tens of feet tall, muscular ape leaped high into the air and raised his huge wooden stick, swinging towards the three senior magi. That huge wooden stick seemed nothing special, but while Ape was waving it, a few natural-formed spell symbols suddenly lit up. All of the nearby plants started emitting a bright cyan light. Thousands of light streams quickly converged towards the wooden stick. After a short while, the originally gray wooden stick turned into a cyan dragon-shaped light. "Booze! 100! Growled Ape, followed by a loud and sonorous dragon roar. Then the dragon-shaped cyan light heavily hit on the three senior magi their bodies. The senior magus who was running in the front let out a muffled cry. One of his arms had twisted and swelled, and finally exploded into a mass of blood mist, which sprayed hundreds feet far. The wooden stick was so powerful, that even the body of a senior magus was burst open by a single hit. While the senior magus was screaming in both pain and shock, the wooden stick had arrived again and hit his chest, shattering his armor, after which bone-cracking sound came from his body. He flew back and thudded onto the second senior magi, then the third one. All three senior magi of the Black Water Serpent clan were instantly sent flying thousands of feet high in the air, rushing straightly towards the sky, higher and higher, like shooting stars. The power of Ape's hit was incredibly tremendous. The three senior magi bodies clashed the air, bursted large fire sparkles, then finally fell into the jungle miles away. Ji Xiao was badly frightened by this abrupt attack. He screamed out in shock and fled back into the jungle. But soon after he got into the jungle, a skinny arm thrust out from the air, grabbed Ji Xiao's neck and pressed him hard on the ground. Chapter 45, Push. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Editor note: the term Magusriest will be replaced with Maguspriest. This change will be implemented in the previous chapters and in the coming chapters. Chapter 45. Push. The jungle of the South Wastelands was vast and boundless. The abundant life force of this jungle generated and nourished powerful creatures like Heng Luo, Stone and Treeman. Inevitability, there must be other more powerful and mysterious beings living in this jungle. Ji Xiao was pressed hard on the ground by the skinny arm, which nearly broke his neck. He struggled with all of his strength, even made the ground vibrate. However, the skinny arm held his neck tight and didn't move even a bit. A wisp of black smoke rose from the ground into the air. A scary figure slowly emerged from the smoke. It was black and skinny, looked like a human at the first glance, but the 6 crooked horns on its head clearly showed that it was nothing else than a monster. The whole body of this creepy monster was shining with a metallic luster. Its black skin was tightly attached to its bones and its stomach was hollowed. A head-size ball of green light was shining and floating in his stomach. Within the light, a looming face was visible. Blackwater Jiao was standing aside, looking stunned at this powerful monster that had emerged from the black smoke. Although Ji Xiao was a bit weaker than Blackwater Jiao, he still was a powerful senior magus. The fact that the skinny monster caught Ji Xiao so easily made it obvious that this monster was a lot more stronger than him, thought Blackwater Jiao. Creature of the jungle, why are you fighting against me? Don't you know about the powerful Blackwater Serpent clan? Said Blackwater Jiao loudly. In the meanwhile, he bit his own tongue, spat some blood towards the skinny monster, and mumbled a spell. Offerings. A hoarse voice came from the air. Two green flames were blazing in the eye sockets of the skinny monster. It stared at Blackwater Jiao in the eyes, but didn't make any sound. While Blackwater Jiao was perplexed. Another monster came out of the smoke. This one was huge white skeleton and a lot bigger than the skinny monster. This skeleton monster was hundreds of feet broad and nearly 100 feet tall. Except white bones, nothing could be seen on its body. Every time it moved, an ear-purling metal friction sound came from its body. The body shape of this skeleton monster was similar to a tiger or lion, but it had a human skull-like head, only a lot bigger. Human. We are following our agreement. Whoever offer us blood and lives, we fight for them, said the skeleton, while two wisps of smoke were rotating in its eye sockets. While the skeleton was talking, a colorful mist-like phantom lizard quickly crawled out of the skeleton's body and stood on its head, hissing to the horned serpent which was coiled next to Blackwater Jiao's feet. The horned serpent raised its head and hissed back at the phantom lizard, with its 10 feet long black fork-shaped tongue darted out from time to time. Warriors of the Blackwater Serpent clan. Kill Ji Xia. Kill our enemy, shouted Blackwater Jiao. He was focused on Ji Xia all the time, so had no idea about what had happened in the jungle. He suddenly seemed to have realized something when he saw the two monsters and the phantom lizard, instantly shouted out and gave the attack order. Di Luo, Toba and Toa, who were stunned and stood on the metal centipede's head, suddenly were hit by Blackwater Jiao's voice and realized that they were still on a mission. Di Luo let out a ear-piercing shout, while pointing his finger at Ji Xia. Followed by Di Luo's shout, Toba and Toa raised their weapons in the air, and rushed towards Ji Xia in a lightning speed. They moved so fast that their bodies sliced the air and left a row of after images behind them. There were only tens of remaining Blood Fawn warriors running behind them. However, when facing them, Ji Hao felt like a large troop was coming towards Ji Xia and himself. Ji Hao clenched his spear, while he looked at Toba and Toa nervously. Ji Xia pressed his hand on Ji Hao's shoulder and said smilingly. Hold. Trust your Amma. How, your Amma is quite a nice lady, but, once she gets really angry, even I am scared of her. A cloud of grey mist gushed out of the jungle, as if to prove what Ji Xia had just said, and enveloped the jungle within the radius of 10 miles. Toba and Toa's movement became muddles as if they were drunk. They were only hundreds of feet away from Ji Xia and Ji Hao. They could have rushed up to Ji Xia and Ji Hao within the span of a few breaths. But, after the grey mist appeared, they started to feel like they were running on an endless road. Toba and Toa ran at their highest speed for quite a while, but still were hundreds of feet away from Ji Xia and Ji Hao, who didn't seem to have moved at all. At this moment, countless vague and twisted figures started to emerge from the mist. Every single one of them was giving an incomparably evil vibe. Their faces were blurred, no one could clearly see what they looked like, but all of those warriors in the mist had a strange feeling. These scary beings with huge widened eyes, stared at them in similar manner as wolves stared at their prey. A few whirlwinds formed in the mist, pulling all tens of Blood Fawn warriors inside. A short while later, the whirlwind subsided and tens of armors and weapons were left lying on the ground. Those warriors were all gone, without leaving even a single hair. Di Luo was dumbfounded by what had happened to his warriors. He cast a few gusts of wind knives from his erect eye, the wind knives circling around his body and firmly shielded him in the core. However, facing the grey mist and those unbelievably mysterious scary beings, he was at a loss what to do. Magus magic. Is this what those Magus do? Murmured Di Luo with his teeth gnashing, his eyes showed fury and confusion. Granddaddy, where are you? These monsters and ghosts of the jungle. I can't deal with them. Where are you? Only you can disperse them, then we can kill Ji Xia. Blackwater Jiao looked up at the sky, murmured unsettlingly. In another deep valley, which was 300 miles away from the Cold Stream Valley, a fire crow with the wingspan of over 500 feet was quietly floating in the air. The fire crow was shrouded by a faint fiery light. Under its belly, 3 sharp claws were sparkling brightly. An elderly man wearing leather cloak and a bone helmet was silently standing on the head of the fire crow, looking down coldly. Different from other scrawny Magusriists in the Fire Crow clan, this elderly man was strong and sturdy, even a bit taller than Ji Xia. His height reached over 4 meters, and he seemed like a giant. Holding in his hand, was a 20 feet long bone cane. The thinnest part of this bone cane had human leg size thickness. It didn't really look like a cane, instead, it was more like a mace, powerful enough to break a city wall. 1,000 feet long horned serpent was coiled and floating in the air, spurting poisonous gas towards the fire crow. Another elderly man, who attacked Jiang Shui together with Blackwater Jiao months ago, was standing on the horned serpent's head. He stared at the other elderly man standing on the fire crow's head, while his eyes showed a slight trace of fear. Ji Zhua, never thought you'd come here. What are your fire crow clan doing? Even you showed up in person, protecting Ji Xiao. Then why did you let Ji Shu get the position of Holy Land Warriors leader? That is our clan affair, it has nothing to do with you vile bugs. Ji Zhua sniffed and growled. Go away, or die here. Though it's not easy to kill you, I'm always willing to try. Continued Ji Zhua. While speaking, Ji Zhua stamped his foot on the fire crow's head. The fire crow opened its beak, spew out a thick, lava-like stream of gold flame from its beak, that set even the sky ablaze. Chapter 46, Frustration. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 46. Frustration. Inside the jungle, the Blackwater Serpent clan's 3 senior magi and their horned serpents were beaten badly by Ape, Treeman, and Stone. Although they were with only 3 of them, Ape, Treeman, and Stone, have easily gained the upper hand in this fight. Ji Xiao was already badly frightened and couldn't make his mind up, added with being sneak attacked by the skinny monster, he had now completely lost his bearing. He was madly swinging his arms and legs, struggling with all his strength. By doing so, he even dug a deep huge hole on the ground. However, no matter how hard he tried, he just couldn't stand up and break away from the skinny monster's control, which stayed as still as a rock, grabbing his neck tight. Di Luo, Toba and Toa had currently become extremely careful, and wouldn't dare to rashly launch an attack. This was the first time that they had encountered such a large-scale Maguspriest's magic, which was cast by a real, powerful, South Wasteland Maguspriest. Hundreds of Blackwater Serpent clan warriors rushed out of the jungle. They were waving their swords and making hissing-like sounds to contact each other. The jungle was currently filled with a dense fog, which created an incomparably weird atmosphere. Those Blackwater Serpent clan warriors ran into the fog unpreparedly. Their speed was slowed down, as soon they got into the fog. Their pace became disoriented and their feet heavy, every step was so hard, it seemed as if their feet was glued down. The laughter of Qin Yin came from every corner of the jungle. Along with his voice, arrows swished towards those warriors from every direction. Every single arrow hit right on the face of one of those Blackwater Serpent clan warriors, none of the arrows missing the target. The poison attached on the arrowheads made those elite warriors melt into liquids within the span of few breaths. The current situation was extremely unfavorable for the enemies of the Blackwater Serpent clan. The way this was going, it wouldn't take too long for them to be completely annihilated. Ji Xia. A mad shout came from the jungle. Ji Mu, who was sent flying by Stone earlier, now walked out of the jungle in big steps, waving his axe. With his body wrapped by a ablaze gold-red flame, he looked as if he was on fire. The gray fog around Ji Mu's body quickly disappeared. The mysterious powers hiding in the fog kept themselves away from Ji Mu in fear. The Fire Crow bloodline, passed through the ancient Golden Fire Crow, was highly harmful to those mysterious beings of the jungle. Therefore, though they possessed great strength, those mysterious beings wouldn't dare to attack Ji Mu head-on. Mu. What is all this? Ji Xia clenched his spear so tight that the spear even started making a creaking sound. You ganged up with those monsters, even the archenemy of our Fire Crow clan. Only for killing me. Have you forgotten? In the South Wasteland, how many clans disappeared in this vast jungle only because they spent too much power to fight against their own people? I don't need to name a lot, just the Yen Jiao clan, which was extremely powerful at that time. Ji Xia's gentle voice was now filled with confusion and sadness. Ji waved his axe in the air and sent a great wave of fire, which sent fire sparks everywhere and split the ground, causing 1,000-feet-long crack on the ground, and set the soil and rock inside the crack on fire. Tens of arrows darted toward Ji Mu from every direction. However, all of the arrows were burned into wisps of smoke, once they touched the blazing fire wrapped around Ji Mu's body. Save your talk. Ji Mu growled. The Fire Crow clan will only become stronger under the lead of brother Ji Shu. Yen Jiao clan. I know about them. They died only because they didn't have the power great enough to support them. Is Baifeng clan the power you're talking about? Ji Xia growled harshly. We are the offsprings of the Gold Fire Crow, the people of the Fire Crow clan. Why do we have to give the rein to unreliable outsiders and let them decide our fate? Ji Mu stayed silent, approaching Ji Xia step by step. His skin slowly turned transparent, under which, there seemed lava to be flowing. The ground he trod through quickly turned into lava, dispersing the dense gray fog for miles round. Ji Mu walked nearly a mile forward, got close to Ji Xia, then shouted out. Di Luo, my old friend. Come, let's finish him together. Brother Ji Shu hurt him badly months ago, he hasn't fully recovered yet. Let's kill him together, now. Pausing a second, Ji Mu's face twisted, and said with a hideous grin. I assume that you haven't met Ji Xia's woman yet. Kill him, his woman won't let you down, she must be worth a fortune. Ji Xia roared in rage, large fire fragments spurted out from his body and tens of awakened Magus caves started emitting an eye-piercing light. Mu, I have nothing else to say to you. I will kill you. Now. Here. Ji Xia growled. While Ji Xia was growling, Ji Hao dashed out, with his spear held in his hands. At every step forward, blooming lotus-like flames burst out from the air under his feet. Ji Hao's speed was many times faster than usual. Kill! Ji Hao let out a great shout. Small fiery light spots were ejected from Ji Hao's spearhead, hitting on the throats of tens of peak-level novice magi, and sent them flying one after another. Blood splashed everywhere. Abba! We have nothing to say to these heartless bastards. Since they've already come, they should leave their lives here. Ji Hao slaughtered tens of enemies, then shouted to Ji Xia. Intentionally, Ji Hao flew closely past Ji Mu's body. Ji Mu's pupils rapidly shrunk. He raised the axe and hacked towards Ji Hao subconsciously, while yelled. Ji Hao! You're pretty hard to kill. The flame spurting out from the axe was about to swallow Ji Hao's body. However, the next moment, a sharp caw came from Ji Hao's shoulder. Mr. Crow, who was firmly standing on Ji Hao's shoulder, expanded its body suddenly, and smashed his feet-long claw hard on the axe. Bang! Followed by a huge bang, Ji Mu screamed out and staggered backwards. He couldn't stand the tremendous power of Mr. Crow. At the same moment, the skeleton monster, who was quietly waiting at the side for an opportunity, rushed over. He pressed its huge bone paw on Ji Mu's body. Ji Mu instantly cried out, and soon, blood mixed with pieces of internal organs, gushed out of his mouth. Although it looked as if the skeleton had only pushed him gently, Ji Mu felt like he was being smashed by tens of huge mountains. Ji Xia. Ji Mu let out a wail, grabbed a piece of dark red jade from the bag, wrapped around his waist, and crumbed it. A sharp bird call then came from the jade piece, along with which, Ji Mu's body transformed into a stream of fiery light and rushed high into the air, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Such a shame. Ji Hao looked at the sky and said, as a person of the Fire Crow clan, he used the treasure of the Baifeng clan to save his own life. What can be more shameless than this? Mr. Crow fluffed his feathers and glared at the faint fiery light, which was fleeting across the sky. As Ji Hao said, a Fire Crow clan member used the life-saving tool made by Baifeng clan Magus Priest. Nothing could be more shameless, and could make him more furious than this. Blackwater Jiao was standing on the horned serpent's head and worryingly looked around. Why hasn't Granddaddy come yet? What had happened to him? Di Luo, who stood near Blackwater Jiao, also looked around in distress. Suddenly, he let out a scream and threw out a sharp gust of cyan wind from his erect eye, rushing towards Ji Xia, along with Toba and Toa. You, the snake-riding barbarian. Let's kill this guy. While rushing, Di Luo laughed hideously and yelled, I want to see what does his woman look like. Ji Hao raised his spear, pierced another tens of Blackwater Serpent clan warriors to death, then swung the spear towards Di Luo's heart with his hand behind his back. Chapter 47, Failure. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 47. Failure. In the other valley, the three-legged fire crow was soaring in the air, spewing flame, which was as pure as colored glaze, towards the gigantic horned serpent. The great heat of the flame melted the mountains that laid aside and burned pieces of the jungle into ashes. The horned serpent was currently coiled on the ground, emitting a blue light from its horn and fending against the fire crow's flame. In the meanwhile, gusts of dark blue, cold wind blew out from the horned serpent's mouth, attacking the fire crow from every direction. The fire crow quietly floated in the air with a looming red light emerging from its black feathers. On the edges of every single feather, a few spell symbols flashed and splashed fire sparks, then disappeared quickly. Only with the heat emitted from those feathers, was the fire crow able to disperse all of those cold winds. Ha! Ji Zhuo laughed out loud. He was holding an oddly shaped shield, made of a beast's skull, in his left hand and a huge bone cane in his right hand. His body was wrapped in blazing flame, which made him look like a fiery god. Every single move of his produced a monstrous flame. Blackwater Gui, you're one of my old friends. Do you remember your Abba and uncle? It was me who killed them. Ji Zhuo waved his bone cane and cast streams of flames randomly, while provoking his enemy. The deathly pale face of Blackwater Gui had almost turned blue. In his hands, was a black, short bone cane, and on his skin numerous snake tattoos wriggled as if they were alive. A huge gust of wind blew out from his body, soon after which, a large cloud of dark blue ice crystals quickly emerged from the air and immediately condensed into several ice walls in front of him. Usually, Blackwater Gui's ice walls were incomparably firm. Even tens of ordinary senior magi with their combined power couldn't harm even a little bit of his ice walls. However, Ji Zhuo was way too powerful. With only a slight hit, Ji Zhuo shattered several tens of feet thick ice walls. Every moment, Blackwater Gui released hundreds of ice walls and shielded himself in every direction. However, Ji Zhuo waved his bone cane for 1,000 times within the same moment. Ice walls were continuously shattering. Ji Zhuo was excited, even starting to roar and curse. Lava-like thick flames started circulating through his body, emitting an eye-piercing light and producing an even greater heat. He was stimulated by the fight and released all of his power, even his sturdy body swelled bigger. Followed by a muffled bang, the huge bone cane broke through tens of ice walls and directly hit Blackwater Gui's chest. Instantly, Gui let out a howl. His scrawny body was sent flying and his chest was hollowed. His pale skin quickly turned red, and wisps of lava gushed out from every one of his pores. Ha, Blackwater, you! Ji Zhuo raised the bone cane and laughed proudly. But in the next moment, his laughter suddenly stopped and his expression changed, his body intensely shook and he staggered a few steps back. With a tiny swishing sound, a black, jade knife, which was only as thick as a bean and as long as a finger, rapidly rose high into the air, transforming into a beam of black light, and flew back to Blackwater Gue's hand. Just now, the jade knife had pierced the Jiju's left ankle. A black line rose from his left ankle towards his thigh, where it passed, the flame-wrapping Jiju's body quickly subsided, a thick layer of ice appeared on his left leg, replacing the flame. This again. Jiju mumbled annoyingly. You never launched a frontal attack, you bastard. I hate you vile bugs. One day, I'll destroy you all. Blackwater Gue grinned wanly, grabbed the jade knife, and let out a sharp roar. Following his voice, the horned serpent, which was fighting against the fire crow, turned around and dashed up to Gue, carrying him on its head and fleeing towards the deep jungle at its highest speed. The three-legged fire crow cawed sharply, attempting to chase them. Jiju sat down on the ground, gasping, and said feebly, "Don't bother. That old bastard was injured quite seriously. He won't be able to come out and make trouble for quite a while. My old friend, haven't you realized that I too am badly hurt?" Jiju patted his frozen thigh and said with a weird smile on his face, "I'm badly injured and can't make it back to the Gold Black Mountain. The nearest Fire Crow clan territory is the Cold Stream Valley, I'm going there to take a rest." Jiju then let out a caw-like shout and hopped onto the Fire Crow's head. The Fire Crow flapped its enormous wings and rushed high into the air, leaving a beam of fiery light behind it. It then hovered around, diving towards Cold Stream Valley. In the Cold Stream Valley, Toa threw a punch toward Jiju's spear, which was about to pierce Di Luo's back. The spear shook intensely, and nearly broke from the great power hidden in Toa's punch. Jiju's arms quivered, and he quickly retreated in large strides. With his current power, Jiju couldn't hold off the strength of a senior magi yet. A slight punch from Toa nearly ruptured his internal organs. A stream of blood gushed out from his throat, and he couldn't help but to spit out a wisp of blood. In his lower belly, the multicolored flame was quietly blazing. Part of the senior magi blood released from Ji Kuei's magic seal while Jiju was in a coma, was now quickly turning into beams of multicolored light and being absorbed by Jiju's body. Soon, Jiju's internal wounds were healed by the multicolored light. He took a deep breath, stretching his neck and cracking his bone joints. His strength had just improved 10,000 stones after being nourished by the senior magi blood. Break. Jiju didn't risk fighting against Toba and Toa closely. He hid in the dense fog and locked his hands together, he gathered natural power and sent it towards them. At this moment, Jixia was surrounded by Di Luo, Toba and Toa, in addition to Blackwater Jiao and his serpent. The four of them launched their attacks towards Jixia simultaneously. Punches, daggers, wind-knives, poison gas, and cold air, all kinds of attacks were thrown at Jixia, hitting his body like drops in a rainstorm. Within the span of a few breaths, Jixia was beaten black and blue. However, a sphere of white cyan light slowly rose from Jixia's head. Within the light, the Mu Xing Pearl, Qing Fu's inherited Magus treasure, appeared and quickly released a large amount of life force energy, which was then absorbed by Jixia's body and started to heal him. With the energy released by the Mu Xing Pearl and the strong life force of a powerful senior Magus, Jixia's wounds quickly healed. All of the attacks casted by the four people and horned serpent seemed to have failed to cause any harm to Jixia. Once Jixia was healed, Jiju rushed over, along with the vast power of the mantra Dan with 9 secret words. Followed by the rumbling of thunder, tens of fist-thick lightning bolts abruptly fell on the four people's heads. Besiegement from the four people was interrupted by the lightning. Di Luo fled backward, frightened, but once he turned around, he noticed a skeleton monster standing right in front of him. The skeleton gave a horrible grin and pressed Di Luo on the ground with its huge bone paw. Under the skeleton's paw, all of Di Luo's bones started creaking. He was then sent flying by the skeleton and hit a large tree nearly a mile away, falling unconscious. Toba and Toa instantly stopped attacking Ji Xia, turned around, and rushed toward Di Luo. Blackwater Jiao showed hesitation, and took a few steps back subconsciously. By then, he was the only one left to deal with Ji Xia. A sharp caw came from the jungle farther away. Blackwater Jiao's face suddenly turned deathly pale when he heard the call. Did Granddaddy lose? To whom? Whom? Retreat. Retreat. This is a trap. Damn Ji Mu. How dare you lie to me, yelled Blackwater Jiao. Lo Blackwater Jiao then jumped onto the serpent's head and tried to flee. However, before he could make it into the jungle, 3 black thorns of life and death flashed across the dense fog and pierced through the bodies of Blackwater Jiao and his horned serpent. Blackwater Jiao let out a great howl, and his face turned dark immediately. Retreat, he screamed out of panic, and then ran into the jungle with the hundreds of remaining Blackwater serpent warriors. By now, a well-planned ambush had failed completely. Ji Hao shouted, chasing into the jungle under the cover of Mr. Crow. Chapter 48, Punishment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 48. Punishment. Late at night, bonfires were blazing in the Cold Stream Valley. Qing Fu, holding a flagpole made of white bones, with long, white streamers tied onto it, lively walked around Cold Stream Valley like a fairy who only appeared during the night. She was waving the flagpole and whispering an ancient, mysterious spell, sending those mysterious beings of the jungle back to where they came from. The skinny black monster and white skeleton monster, both the strongest amongst the mysterious beings, were mumbling something. They had consumed the blood of 2 gigantic beasts. They walked with satisfaction into the fog and disappeared slowly. Gusts of whirlwinds blew in every direction. Murmurs resounded through the air. The mad slaughter that occurred in Cold Stream Valley tonight stimulated the nearby mysterious beings who had yet to calm down from the commotion. Upon a blazing bonfire, 3 near 100-foot long, skinned horned serpents were being grilled. The pure white serpent meat sizzled, large drops of fat fell continuously into the flames, emitting an extremely attractive scent. Ji Hao happily sat beside the bonfire, gobbling a huge piece of serpent meat in his hands. Stone was sitting quietly next to Ji Hao. Every time Ji Hao finished a piece of snake meat, he crushed the bone for Ji Hao. Once the bone was crushed, glittering, translucent marrow seeped out, along with a thick scent. Ji Hao then opened his mouth, caught the falling marrow, which contained great life force energy and internal power, and swallowed it. In Ji Hao's lower abdomen, the multicolored flame temporarily stopped transforming the senior magi blood. Instead, it was working hard to transform the power and energy contained within the serpents' bodies. All 3 of the horned serpents were as powerful as an ordinary senior magus. Their muscles and blood contained large amounts of power, which was highly beneficial to Ji Hao. After finishing another portion of serpent meat, Ji Hao stood up, stretched his body and slowly performed a martial arts routine, as if no one else was present there. Multicolored light beams were circulating through his body simultaneously with a great heat. Ji Hao felt extremely hot, and sweat continuously poured down his body. After absorbing part of the power contained within the serpent's body, his physical strength was further improved. His joints cracked while he moved and made a subtle metal clattering like sound. Stone, keep an eye on this serpent meat for me. This is an award from Granddaddy, and I won't waste even a little bit of it, said Ji Hao while delightfully looking at the serpent's meat. He only needed 2 days to swallow all of the meat and absorb the power contained within them. By that time, his power will have definitely improved to another degree. Stone responded with a muffled voice, turning his huge stone head to survey the area. It seemed as though, no matter who came near this meat, he would send that person flying. Near another bonfire, Ji Zhua sat on the ground and leaned against a giant stone. One of his legs was covered in a thick layer of ice. He narrowed his eyes, staring at Ji Xiao, who kneeled in front of him and looked as if he wouldn't dare to move even a little bit. Ji Zhuo was fiddling with a piece of gold which was found in the stream. In Ji Zhuo's hands, the hard piece of gold quickly changed forms, as though it was piece of clay. Xiao, regarding bloodline, the ancestor of your cousin was my fifth brother. After a period of silence, Ji Zhuo said in a low voice, considering this, we are close relatives. Ji Xiao knelt on the ground, trembling, and was dripping with perspiration. That little brother of mine, Xiao Wu, do you know how he died? Ji Zhuo looked up to the starry sky and continued, it was 600 years ago, to save a mine that was producing fire copper, my brother fought against 5,000 Black Water Serpent clan warriors together with 300 of our clansmen. He killed 850 of the enemies, exhausted himself and was killed in the end. While speaking, Ji Zhuo suddenly threw the piece of gold towards Ji Zhao's head. The head of a senior magus was very hard. The gold lump was smashed flat onto his head, almost enveloping Ji Zhao's entire head. Those Black Water Serpent clansmen chopped Xiao Wu's head off, turned it into a mug, and even now, it is still placed on the altar of their ancestral temple. Ji Zhuo angrily growled in a low voice, flames flashing across his pupils. Xiao Wu is one of your direct ancestors, his head is still placed on the altar of the Black Water Serpent clan's ancestral temple, and you colluded with those vile snakes and attacked your own clansmen. Ji Hao, having already filled his stomach with serpent meat, slowly walked over and stood beside Ji Zhuo with arms crossed around his chest, and coldly stared down at Ji Xiao. Ji Xiao glanced at Ji Hao, plucked the flat gold piece from his head, and shouted hoarsely, but Ji Hao killed who? My only son. Who? Who wanted to kill me? I swear to the ancestors' souls, Hu, Feng, and Shui, the three of them colluded with Jiang Shui and tried to kill me. Uncle Xiao, do I look like an idiot who just waits for others to chop my head off when someone tries to kill me? Ji Hao looked at Ji Xiao, who was reddening, half in shame and half in rage. Ji Xiao opened his mouth but didn't say anything. You knew who was going to kill me, didn't you? Ji Hao continued with a calm face. Ji Xiao stayed silent, however, his distorted face showed that Ji Hao was telling the truth. Granddaddy, Uncle Xiao knew about the fact that Hu colluded with outsiders and attempted to kill me, but he didn't stop his own son. I killed Hu in self-defense. He then colluded with the archenemy of our Fire Crow clan and tried to kill me, Abba, and Amma. What did the Baifeng clan give him for this? Ji Hao continued while staring at the pale, darkened face of Ji Xiao. Ji Zhuo took a deep breath, grabbed a stone from the ground and hit Ji Zhao's head, yelling, what did the Baifeng clan give you for this? The stone shattered into dust on Ji Zhao's head. Ji Xiao then murmured, once we kill Brother Xia, the Black Water Serpent clan will release Jiang Shui. Ji Mu's son will marry Jiang Shui instead of Ji Wu, and one of Jiang Yao's sisters will become my wife and bear my children. Ji Shu has already turned himself into a dog of the Baifeng clan, and you're planning to get a Baifeng clan woman as your wife. Then from now on, should the Baifeng clan rule the holy land of our Fire Crow clan, or should it be our own clansmen? Said Ji Hao while laughing mockingly. Both Ji Zhuo and Ji Xiao didn't say anything. Ji Hao looked at Ji Xiao and continued slowly, you colluded with outsiders and betrayed our own clansmen. Uncle Xiao, you shall die for your mistakes. Ji Xiao quivered intensely, then madly jumped up from the ground, pointing his finger at Ji Hao and yelled, what did you say? Little bastard, what qualification do you have to decide whether I should die or not? Are you one of the elder magi? Are you one of the magus priests? How did Ji Xia educate you? All of Ji Zhao's awakened magus acupoints were blocked by Qing Fu with the thorns of life and death right after he was captured. Qing Fu also reduced his physical strength with a special drug, therefore, Ji Xiao was now not any different from ordinary clansmen. Ji Hao threw a punch to Ji Zhao's face, easily knocking him down, grabbed his neck, and walked towards the deep valley. "Granddaddy, am I right? No matter why Uncle Shao did all of this, he should die for his sins. So, he has to die. After all, we have to follow our ancestors' rules," said Ji Hao with a cold voice as he walked. Ji Xia stood up quickly beside the bonfire, attempting to stop Ji Hao. He still thought about the friendship between Ji Shao and himself, and he cannot bear to kill Ji Shao like this. After all, Ji Shao was a powerful senior magus. In the southern wasteland, any senior magus was an extremely valuable force. However, Qing Fu appeared in front of Ji Xia, opened her arms and stopped him. Ji Xia was going to say something, but Ji Zhua grabbed him, pulling him down to his seat. He did the wrong thing, so he has to bear the punishment. "Xia, you're a good brother and a good commander, however, you'll never make a good clan leader," said Ji Zhua. "This kid, Hao, is much better than you." Chapter 49, Interrogation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Note: Magus Monarch has been replaced by Magus King and spell names are written within, rather than. Chapter 49. Interrogation. At the end of the valley, Ji Hao forced Ji Shao to face the gold-black mountains and kneel. Ji Shao tried to struggle and resist a few times, however, his Magus acupoint were sealed and his physical strength was reduced by Qing Fu's drug. He could never break away from Ji Hao's control. He knelt down facing the black gold mountains, 10,000 miles away. His emotions stirred, he hauled towards the sky in shame and anger. "Uncle Shao, save the scream, it won't help you," said Ji Hao, fiddling with a dagger, made of blood. Jade. His fingers flicked rapidly and the dagger rotated quickly between his fingers, a circle of blood. Red shadow appeared, which shone under the starlight. "Since Grandpa Ji Zhua is here, no one can save you. Both you and I know about his temper." Uncle Jia's head was chopped off by Grandpa Ji Zhua himself, when Jia fled from the battle against the Blackwater Serpent clan. Ji Hao patted Ji Zhao's shoulder and said in an honest tone, "The mistake you made is way more serious than fleeing from a battle." Ji Zhao gasped, and said with a trembling voice, "How, all this was because of who? Why did you kill him?" "Indeed, he tried to kill you. But couldn't you just wound him and warn him? Why did you have to kill him?" "Because he didn't show any mercy when he tried to kill me," said Ji Hao coldly, while staring at Ji Shao with a mocking smile on the corners of his mouth. "My dear uncle, haven't you realized? The issue between you and me is not because of who. In fact, whose death was only an excuse that you gave to yourself. You're young and strong, as long as you get yourself a couple more wives, you can have even 100 sons. The biggest issue between you and me is Ji Shu and Jiang Yao, who is supporting Ji Shu, and the entire Baifeng clan, who is supporting Jiang Yao." Ji Hao looked into Ji Zhao's faltering eyes and said word by word, "In the name of our ancestors' souls, you should examine your own conscience and see if I'm telling the truth." Both of Ji Zhao's arms were pushing against the ground and supporting his body, large amounts of sweat dripped down his forehead in streams. He breathed heavily and trembled intensely. Ji Shu. Ji Zhao's eyeballs slowly rotated in his eye sockets, losing focus. His healthy face was now deathly pale and darkened. Je. Ji Hao whispered the 9 secret words, and locked his fingers together, then gently pressed his finger onto the area between Ji Zhao's eyebrows. Ji Hao's pupils changed to a golden red color, 9 spell symbols slowly rotated around both of his pupils. An oddly powerful force capable of soul control was sent from Ji Hao's pupils deep into Ji Zhao's eyes. Most of the senior magi in the southern wasteland neglected cultivating their souls. On the contrary, magus priests who concentrated on the practice of all kinds of magic sorceries, have always worked hard to nourish their souls through special and mystical methods. By doing so, they could slowly increase their spiritual power and use it to cast all kinds of magic sorceries. Magus priests capable of communicating with gods, ghosts, and other mysterious beings, could only slowly improve their souls with all of their efforts. not to mention senior magi like Ji Shao, who had never even attempted to improve the power of his soul. Although Ji Shao also has a relatively powerful soul, the power of his soul was only nourished by his own senior Magus blood, thus he could only rely on his strengthened body. The level of his soul and spiritual power were no better than the soul and spiritual power of 3-year old Ji Hao. At this time, Ji Shao was already hopeless, the power of his soul scattered, which allowed Ji Hao to easily take control of his mind. "Uncle, the mistake you made is unforgivable. You have to die. Why don't you tell me what you know before that? Why must Ji Shu take the position of commander from my Abba? What is he planning? Just tell me everything you know." Ji Shao slightly quivered, eyes staring without focus. Following the soft voice of Ji Hao, he slowly opened his mouth. Ji Hao controlled Ji Zhao's soul carefully, digging out all the secrets buried within Ji Zhao's heart. Gradually, Ji Hao's facial expression turned strange. Did Ji Shu try everything to get the position of commander for this? Thought Ji Hao. No wonder Ji Mu knew those slave dealers before. They really are old friends. Damn Ji Shu, you surely found yourself a good way to earn a fortune. Although the Fire Crow clan had already become an auxiliary clan of the Baifeng clan, due to the absence of powerful high-level magi, such as Magus kings for thousands of years, the firm foundation of the Fire Crow clan was still there. With a large number of branch clans and vast territory for hundreds of thousands of miles around, the Fire Crow clan was still a very powerful and thriving clan in the southern wasteland. Surrounding the Holy Land in the Gold-Black Mountains were thousands of branch clans of the Fire Crow clan. The population of the smallest amongst these branch clans was over 100,000, and within this, there were at least 8 to 10 senior magi within 100,000 warriors. As for branch clans with large populations, for example Ji Shu's clan, had over 1 million people and hundreds of senior magi. After Ji Shu became the leader of the Holy Land warriors, with the exception of elder magi and magus priests, all of the warriors, including senior magi, junior magi and novice magi, had to follow Ji Shu's lead and do whatever he says. Long ago, Ji Shu started to secretly work with slave dealers, capturing and selling many people from smaller clans. By now, with Ji Shu's leadership and the support gained from a few elder magi and magus priests in the Holy Land, allowed his small-scale slave trade to quickly expand. Before, when Ji Xia and other former leaders held the highest power within the clan, the Fire Crow clan had always been lenient towards the small clans of the southern wasteland. As long as those clans were willing to pay a certain amount of taxes, they would be under the protection of the Fire Crow clan. However, as Ji Shu planned, those taxes were not even worth mentioning. All the Fire Crow clan's auxiliary clans would become his slave suppliers and continuously supply slaves to him. According to Ji Shao, Ji Shu would even choose to start a war if he couldn't get the number of slaves he wanted. He would not only fight against the archenemy, Blackwater Serpent clan, but would also attack the small clans which bordered the Fire Crow clan and had no enmity with the Fire Crow clan. These small clans would all become Ji Shu's prey. He's going to set the entire southern wasteland into turmoil. Ji Hao finished his interrogation and asked, how dare he even plan this? Only with the support of Jiang Bo. Is Jiang Bo even powerful enough to withstand the repercussions? Ji Shao smiled bitterly, shook his head, and kept quiet. Although Ji Shao colluded with Ji Shu a long time ago, he was neither from Ji Shu's clan nor a close relative. How could Ji Shu trust him and let him know all of his most important secrets? Goodbye then, my uncle. Ji Hao raised the dagger and said, by the way, your senior Magus blood won't be wasted, not even a little bit. My Abba and Amma need it to recover. After eating a portion of horned serpent meat, Ji Hao's physical strength had vastly improved. He injected all of his internal power into the jade dagger. A faint light quietly flashed through the air. When the light faded, Ji Hao had already thrown nearly 1,000 stabs towards Ji Zhao's chest, finally cutting open his chest and piercing into his heart. Ji Xiao, whose soul was still under Ji Hao's control, let out an ashen smile. A golden red flame was blazing in his heart, drawing all of his power and blood inwards, which then condensed into a sphere of golden red senior magi blood, containing all of Ji Zhao's power and life force, and slowly seeped out of his heart through the cut. Old man. Now I have the senior Magus blood from Ji Xiao, can I give the Bu Tian Bulu magic spell to my Abba and Amma? In his own overcast spiritual space, Ji Hao shouted to the air. A dense fog started circulating, slowly condensing into a vague figure, who was looking down at Ji Hao.